use multiple servers, for example. But it mostly means that you want to not be bound to one specific server. And one problem you usually face is that you have data stored in the local file system, which is not temporary data, but data you actually need everywhere. So usually I tell a much bigger story. I keep it quite short. I hope you don't mind. So this talk then is mostly about how to become server independent, that you can say, okay, I have 5 web servers and a few database servers or whatever, and you could actually kill any of these web servers and wouldn't lose any data with your PHP Flow application. That's the whole idea. And so if you have a Neos website, for example, then you have 3 things you basically need to store. The first thing is are the objects. So you have your models, and you need to store these objects. Usually, I use a database for that, like MySQL or Postgres. You could also use Couch. Depends on the pane you have and the pane you want to have. So, but that is, I mean, it's not easy to solve, but it can be solved that you have a cluster of MySQL, etc. And if you not want to do that yourself, in the meantime, there are providers where you can just rent a MySQL cluster and don't have to care about the setup. For the content part in Neos, we have an abstraction on top of that, and that is our content repository. So we're not accessing the database directly, but have some hierarchical structure we're using. But in the end, also the content ends up in a database. So what's left are the resources. We call them resources. You might call them assets. That would be any uploads you have in your application, any images, PDF files, whatever. Also stuff you generate. That might be thumbnails or invoices, whatever. And the goal was that you don't store that in your local file system. Actually, that has been the idea from the start with Flow, from version 1. And that's why we hide the fact that there are files and paths. You never get in touch with them directly. Instead, we have resource objects. And so if you have an upload, for example, you won't get any file name or direct access to the path or something. Also for publishing it in your template, you would not use some relative URL. I know if you do, and also we did in Neos, but you shouldn't, because you cannot be sure where the file is actually stored. So Sebastian will now give you an overview of how the current resource system works. We have a little sample, a bookshop.
Right, so Robert will just click and point.
Yeah, and so he'll basically show you how it's currently working as a reminder how the resource management works, and then we'll look at how that can be cloud enabled.
So just a quick question: who's using XSpace? Okay, so you all know Fluid, you all know controllers. Okay, very fine, very nice. So who's used Flow before? Who has used the resource management of Flow before? A few people. Okay, cool. So that just as a quick reminder for the people who are not that much interested. So we have this bookshop example where you can create a new book, you can add your title, ISBN, and the interesting part is actually the image upload you have here, because there you choose a resource actually. So you can upload the image, or you could create a book basically by that. You can delete that, add it to the basket. So let's look how it's done inside. So we're still opening that package.
Maybe where it's stored and
All right. So if you upload the image, actually, you see the top level of Flow, there's this data directory, and this is basically where all custom data goes into. And we have logs there, for example, and the temporary directory and the persistent folder, which is where persistent resources are stored, stuff like the encryption key and the resources, as you see. And they are hashed somehow. And I'll come to this hash in a second. And then at the end, we have this hash of what the image is actually. So here you see the image, but you see there's no file extension, for example, but it's just the image is in there. And what we do is we actually take a hash over the content of the file itself so that we are able to decouple if a file is uploaded twice, for example, we are still able to just store it once. So that's why we do that and why we have this structure of this hash structure essentially.
And the subdirectories are new here.
Yeah, and in the old system we didn't have these subdirectories like in the Flow 2.0 resource management. In the resource management coming with 2.1 we have these subdirectories. So the structure changed a bit, but essentially it's still the same. So should we just
outside the web root?
Exactly. The data directory is outside the web directory. So if you have a Flow installation, the data directory is not inside the publicly available parts of the website, and as well as and that's important for security reasons. So we only expose a very, very small part, which is inside web, to the outside world. And here you see the index.php file, which is the main entry point, the only entry point to PHP code in Flow, this one. And then we have also some static, and then we have also the resources here, basically, because they, of course, also must be publicly available on the website. And we have two kinds of resources. We have static resources, which is essentially everything you put into your resources public folder of your package, stuff like style sheets, JavaScript files, everything which belongs as these kind of assets to your website. And then we have also these what we call persistent resources. You see it's in this resources persistence folder. And you see that here we don't have this hash anymore, but really the image or the name of the image as it is. So there's some transformation going on there. This is what we call the publishing process, which puts the stuff from the data persistent folder to this, for example, to the web resources folder. And I think we're going to check some of the code now. So if we look at the create action, we just created a book. You all are familiar with XSpace, so can go through that really quickly. The important thing is that we don't pass in the array here, but instead we are creating or we are mapping the input data which we get to a domain model, which is the book domain model. You all use that with XSpace? Just okay, cool. So because that's really an essential part. And the book, for example, has the title property, which is a string. It has the price property, which is an integer. You all know that. And then there's the important question, where is the actual image stored? And you see there's also an image property, which is of type resource, TYPO3 Flow, resource. And actually, what we do is we wrap the file upload into an object, which we call this resource object. And this object you can ask for its public URL, for example, or you can ask for the name of the image, or the name and the content type and all these kind of things. So on the domain modeling side, a resource is nothing special. It's just a relation to another domain model, which is provided by Flow, basically. So you see that's pretty convenient.
But also the cool thing is you don't adjust your controller in any way. So you still just have the create action, which expects a new book object. And the only thing you really modify is the model, which has a new property. And of course, you need a template.
Exactly. So let's look at the template for the creation. So we always have the new action and template, which displays the form. And then we have the create action, which actually creates things. So we always put that apart, you know that, probably. And here we have a special view helper inside, which is called fform upload, which you can control in the same way as you say fform text field, for example, to output a simple text field. And with this property path, you define where the image, or where in your target object, so in our book object, the uploaded resource should go into. So you see it's very little code, and this way we say we want the image property to be filled. And if we use that, so that is tied to the resource objects on the back side, basically. So the F-form upload works internally with the resource framework of Flow because, of course, it's both a part of Flow, so we made it fit nicely together.
So, but again, there is no special magic in this form. So you could actually do that without any view helper. Just have a regular form tag, and don't forget the encoding type, of course. But essentially, you just need an upload form and upload the file. And because the book has a property image, which has the target type resource, this is why uploads are actually handled with a property mapper.
Yeah. So that's basically just a convenience method, which makes it a lot more easy in the template, and you don't have to fiddle with must the form field be named exactly, all these kind of things. Yeah. So you see it's pretty simple code so far. Are there questions to this code? Or who can you just tell me like that if you understood it, if you didn't, okay, cool.
Thumbs up.
Nice.
Let's upload the same book again.
Okay. So we create a new book. Somebody else created that one. And actually, there's a sequel now because there will be an updated version of this book soon, which I didn't create, but somebody else from O'Reilly worked on. Oh, you, cool. So he did, cool. Thank you very much. So yeah, nice. So you see it's a different file name, but it's still a copy of the original image, so it has the same size, you see that? So we upload basically a different image. You could also say that I upload, for example, the TYPO3 Neos logo twice, once for the start page, another I need it somewhere else on the website. We both have it on our, so you don't need to think about if the file is there twice or not. So if you see what happens, we still have one resource here, so nothing changed. But we have the resource published twice in two different names. So that's also something which changed a little to the old behavior, but that's also, again, an internal change to how you deal with working with resources. So maybe one thing you can show, Robert, what we missed still is the template where we, just a second, the template where the resource object is outputted. So that's something we were missing so far. So we were able to upload the stuff, and now we would like to see where we see that. So in the controller, that's pretty boring because it's just fetches the book object, it passes it onto the view, and that's basically it, as you all know, probably. And the template, what we see here, the important part is this FURI resource something. Just a question: who knows this inline syntax of Fluid? Can you just? Okay, cool. Thank you. So basically, this is just a different way of writing the FURI resource view helper, which you can also write in the tag-based form. And the only thing we specify here is the resource, and that's book.resource. So you see, again, that's really, really simple. And what we get out of that view helper is the full URL to the published image, no matter where it is. And if you look at that in your browser, you see that it resolves to this, oh, yeah, you don't see that anymore, but if Robert opens it, yeah, you see it actually goes to this full URL we have here. Yeah.
So there's a new cool thing you probably haven't seen yet, but if you see it, you know how to explain it.
Right. So I'm learning this feature now, so that's pretty exciting for me as well. When modeling associations in Doctrine, you have these annotations saying this is a one-to-one relation or one-to-many relation. And a resource relation is usually always one-to-one what you want, because the resource framework internally takes care of that if you upload a resource twice, that it's just stored once. So the decoupling happens at a different position. And now the point is, what happens if you delete a resource? So, or if you delete a book, basically. so far, we had the problem that the image was still lying around, and we didn't have this cleanup mechanism yet. But with the new resource management, which is scheduled to be merged really soon, so it's in the review for quite some time, and it's pretty stable already. We just need to do some finishing touches. You can specify this orphan removal equals true. So that means if the book is deleted and there is no more references to the then basically delete the actual resource as well, delete the image itself on your disk, reclaim the disk space, and so on. So can just show that, just delete one image or one of the books, probably not both of them at the same time.
You see, there it's gone.
Yeah, you see exactly. It's still in the resource there, but it has been gone from down there. If we delete the second one as well. You see it's gone altogether, basically. So, and now you might question what is so special about that. I mean, like that's basically what we did. It was just some internal refactoring. I mean, it's pretty nice, but that's basically how it worked for Flow 1.0 right from the start for quite some time, with some improvements on the detail level. But now comes the nice features. Or the really cool thing, because who is using a content delivery network from you? For bigger websites? Okay, a few people do. Does everybody know what that is, I guess? Okay, cool. So the point is, for some installations, you usually don't want to store your stuff on your local development or on your local production system for a variety of reasons. So there are systems which prevent you from uploading files to the file system. So where the file system is read-only, I think from Amazon there's one, I think. So there are a few of these cloud systems, software as a service where we want Flow to run really nicely. And there it's very important that we just don't modify the file system, because everything we do there is just transient. It can just be removed by the cloud provider at any point in time. So that's not really what we want at that point. So we need some abstraction layer. And yeah, Robert has, for example, a Rackspace account, which is one popular content delivery network. And he's just deleting, or we just have an empty main folder, basically, which we call Robert Lemke's persistent storage. And the important thing is that this Rackspace doesn't have the notion of directories, right? So that imposes some difficulties. So Rackspace, on many other cloud providers, they think in terms of data blobs, essentially. So you basically have just containers for your data, but every container on its own is not structured anymore. So it's just like a flat level of files, essentially.
Who knows the file abstraction layer in TYPO3? A bit, okay. So in the file abstraction layer, we have we simulate directories, actually. We don't do that in Flow, so we don't have any structure for your files. And we do store some metadata, like the file name, etc. And you can use tagging, also nested tagging. But we don't support directories, because most storages don't support directories. And that makes it much, much easier to create your very own storage plugin or publishing plugin, because you have to implement only about 5 methods, basically.
So exactly. So let's. Robert already said that basically you are able to switch the storage backend around. So that's the cool thing about the new resource management. So far we've stored everything on our local machine, in the data temporary or in the data persistent or directory, and in the web resources directory, as you have seen currently. And now Robert is going to show, I hope, the configuration for that. That's the default configuration of Neos, right?
Yeah, I'm looking for that.
For Flow, actually, not for Neos.
Here. So just a reminder, that is part of Flow 2.1, and that means it must be fully backwards compatible with 2.0. So the configuration you see here emulates exactly what happened before. So everything is stored in the file system and published to the file system. And if you install Flow 2.1 when it's released and you do a doctrine migrate, everything will be migrated and all the API works like before and the files are published like before. But you will have a problem if you used paths on your own. So if you circumvented the resource management, that is something you have to look at. So
and that's especially important for JavaScript. If you use require.js, for example, there are some things one needs to be aware of for that. Yeah, but we can maybe at the end talk about that. So let's look at the default configuration. That's very essential. That there's like a few configuration parts. We have the storages. What else do we have? And we have the collections, right?
And targets.
And the targets, right? So we have the storages, we have the collections, and the targets. And first, I would like to untangle these three things. So the storage is basically the flow-facing API side. So that's the thing you configure where the stuff gets uploaded to on the flow side. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? So
well guessed. Yeah.
So then we have...
basically, you need to decide where do you store things, and that can also be a read-only storage. So, for example, the assets you have in your packages, that's a read-only storage with your static resources. And then you have to decide where do you want to publish that. That are the publishing targets, and you can have multiple of them. And the collection is the binding, is the glue between the storage and the target, where you define which storage, and also you can use patterns and tags, etc. So what kind of resources should be published where? And for example, it allows you to define a separate storage for your invoices, and then say, okay, I publish that to the cloud, but only with a temporary URL which is valid for 60 seconds. So, and what's important is that every resource knows to which collection it belongs. And by default, it belongs to the default persistent collection. But you can modify that and say, okay, this belongs to the invoices collection. It also means that all files which can be published need to have the resource object in the database, because otherwise we don't know where to find it and where to publish it. So we need that information.
Mm-hmm. How do I specify the target in an upload? So if I
Yeah, basically you have a separation. If you upload something, you only need to specify in which storage this thing gets stored into, this resource.
Actually, there's a
how do I specify it?
yeah, there's a to-do for that,
Okay.
actually in the code. But the idea is that you can provide it in a hidden field in the form to which collection it should be
Basically in a
published.
secured field, we have this fluid
Yeah.
secure form field mechanism, and there we would probably put it, have it in the property mapping configuration.
Because then you can even provide a selector box if you like.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, right. So the storage is basically where things get into. Then the targets. So that the storage corresponds to the data directory in the file system we've seen before. And you see there are two storages. The one is the default persistent resources storage, which is data persistent resources, what we have seen. And the other one is this default static resources storage, which is everything which is in your packages. So that's the default behavior. And by that, it's also easily modifiable. You can remove the default behavior if you like, for example, as it's just flow configuration, which is SIP by default. Yeah, then we have the targets on the other side. So there, basically, as Robert already said, that explains where the things go. And the default target is the file system target publishing to the web_resources directory. You see web resources static there, it is configured. You configure the base URL, that's all options for this specific file system target. And the same thing, we have the same thing for the static, that's for the static resource, that's for the persistent one. So that's how you see that. So we have, in this simple case, we have two storages and also two publishing targets. But that doesn't have to be this case. It could also be one storage and multiple publishing targets, for example. that's also a pretty common use case. And by that, it's pretty flexible.
One crazy thing you could do already is, instead of providing a path here, you could specify a FTP URL or SSH, and then just mount that under a certain URI. You can actually also specify a different host name here. So without developing a different target, you already could provide all your assets onto a different web server and use a subdomain. So it's just a matter of configuration here. It's extremely simple.
So then we look at the collections, which is the mapping from the storages to the targets. And in this simple case as well, we have two collections. So it's always, in this default behavior, it's this, always in each step, we have these two things going together one by one. But as said, that doesn't have to be the case. So the collection maps storage to a target, what we see here. And you see the local web directory static resources target. It's the one which is defined down here in line down there. And the storage was defined up there, which we've seen. And the important thing here is the path patterns, which says, or basically we have a lot of resources in our storage, and we have to define for which part of the storage the target applies to. So it's basically some kind of select statement. If you think in SQL, you have some data around, you do some selection of it, and then you say, okay, this thing should be moved to this publishing target, essentially. And this way, you could say only PDF files, for example, should go somewhere else.
And one thing which doesn't make it into 2.1 is the post-processing, but I have the interfaces for that in place already. So you will be able, for each collection, to define filters or post-processors, so which, for example, automatically minify your JavaScript or reduce the JPEG quality of files, etc. I won't make it in time, but it's already in this architecture, and you'll be able to, actually you will be able to use aesthetic filters for that, because we are compatible on that level.
So that's basically for stuff, very helpful for stuff like minification, also what we will use internally in Neos as soon as we have that for CoffeeScript to JavaScript compilations, all these kind of things. SAS compilations, uglifying things.
Yeah. You can also uglify your code, just use a different framework. And, so yeah, I'll give it a try while you're releasing something. I just provided a different set of settings for Rackspace in this case. So I just say, okay, I'll have a Rackspace storage now, and I have two different targets. So one of the targets is just a regular Rackspace accessible cloud storage or container. And the other one is CDN enabled in this case. So as soon as I publish something to there, it will be pushed to more than 300 Akamai CDN destinations. By the way, it's extremely cheap, so my average invoice I get from Rackspace while playing with all this is about 2 or 3 cents per month. That's actually why I chose it also. And then finally, just override the collection definition from Flow and say, I want to use this storage for static resources and this target and this storage and target for persistent objects, and that's basically it. Yeah, now let's see what actually happens. So I enabled this configuration by using a different host name here. Kind of cheating.
So yeah, what Robert did there is he used the Flow context which we have in place to say, okay, for a different host name, have a different set of configuration. So we have the development Rackspace settings YAML, and that overrides the development settings YAML. That's also, if you don't know that feature, that's extremely helpful, extremely powerful for lots of cases, for different sets of staging servers, different production systems, all these kind of things. And yeah.
So let's see what happens. Okay, that looks good. It takes longer. And that's actually the purpose of a CDN, that loading takes longer, you know? As you can imagine, while playing with this, and I did a few much more complex stuff because the media package, I created that from scratch again. I can tell a bit more about that. You need some awesome debugging for that because otherwise you don't know what's really happening. So I added a lot of debug information for the log files so you know why is something published or not removed yet because someone else is still using it, etc. You'll find all that in the log files. So, yeah, it looks like before. That's good. Let's take a look at the container here. Not so fast. Yeah, the internet.
Which wireless network do you have? I have the filter currently, and it seems to.
Yeah, okay. I have that too. Oh, there we are. And so, for example, one thing in this case Flow does is setting a custom header. So as soon as you download that image, it sends a content disposition header, which makes it an attachment and a download. I use that for PDF, for example. Also, you see it's, let's just copy that URL here from the image. Oops. So you see, as a nice side effect, a CDN also beautifies your URLs, makes them more readable. So, but at least still there is a file name in the end, you know, which gives you a bit of peace of mind for search engines, etc. But that's just how CDNs work. And also, all the static stuff, you see that automatically the Bootstrap, CSS, etc. is now in CDN. And while you're working on it, actually, well, there are a few things you can do. Resources now actually need to be published. So previously, you had that symlinks pointing to your package, static resources, etc. We don't have symlinks anymore because Rackspace doesn't support symlinks in the cloud. And that means actually you need to publish stuff locally for it to work. So let me just, if I go back to, it still works? No. Okay, so I now switch the configuration back to local, and the image is gone because I deleted that previously. Now, let's take a look at the, the web static resources folder. You see that, if you can see that at least, there are actually no symbolic links to the packages anymore, but these are true copies, so it wastes a lot of your disk space. But actually it is configurable, but it doesn't really matter. So now if I delete this, theoretically this shouldn't work anymore. That's cool. You see that the stuff is gone now. And let me go to, Sites Bookshop. Okay, bigger font. Flow, publish. No, resource, publish. And that could be, for example, the collection static. But I mean, I can try that again. So it took 273 milliseconds to completely publish all static resources to my local directory. And that speed-wise, I realized it's not so much difference checking if something's changed or actually just publishing it again. So for example, what I do in practice is I configure a file watcher in Phpstorm, which triggers this. That is, for me, the most convenient way, because I also, when I use CDNs, then I actually can work with a CDN. I just change a CSS file, and a second later it's published in the CDN. I can actually work with that environment. If you don't like that, don't worry. Actually, we have a backwards compatible solution for that. Let's see. Okay, so it might be that static resources request handler. So I'm very sorry. This is a business conference. I know I show you lots of code here, but it's in your own interest, I can say. Yeah. So we have something in the system called a static resources request handler. Now, you see there's a trigger path, and it means that that's great. That's pretty cool.
No.
Oh yeah, we can. No, it's just the last word now. Maybe it works. It won't. I think I messed up the Nginx configuration here. But the point is, if your mod rewrite rule or your Nginx configuration won't find a file, it now will trigger Flow, and Flow will see, oh, you have a resources path, and will deliver the file right away. So you don't need a file watcher for that. So that's basically it.
So questions?
And just one more thing. The media image, the media handling, you know the TYPO3 media package. I rewrote that from scratch. And imagine you upload an image, you get an image object, you create a variant from it. You can add adjustments, a resize adjustment, a black and white filter adjustment. Then get the resource from that, display it somewhere, and then call a few times, get thumbnail with different sizes. So you end up with 10 images being generated. And then you delete the book or you update the original image, and everything will be updated automatically in your CDN, removed, whatever. So that's quite nice to use, actually. Thank you.
So are there some questions if we still have time, or if not, then we just do it out? But I mean,
I don't know if there's any talk after that.
I think there's a birth of feather in like
The release date would be interesting.
the release date for 2.1, yeah?
So the state of this is quite good. The media package is not stable yet, and I'm not sure if I want to release both at the same time.
No, we won't.
Probably not. So currently, it looks like we have a Flow 2.1 release in December. That's what I